Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Unstuck movement. Thank you for joining this platform. I'm your host, Rob Z, and we created this platform for you to help you get unstuck from difficult places in your life, to give you examples and true stories from real people who have gotten unstuck from difficult places, from challenges throughout their life. So I like to use this podcast for you to have perseverance, to have proof that it's possible, to have the faith and the strength to break through those chains that have been holding you back. I want to thank the sponsors who make the show possible. Thank you so much to AMA, the Authors Millionaire Academy, the Connected Leaders Academy, and UnleashU Now. And today I have a very powerful guest with us on the podcast. I have Kevin O'Connor with us. So Kevin is the author of 2 Floors Above Grief. He has a diverse career spanning over 50 years, encompassing roles as a writer, teacher, principal, curriculum designer, and university instructor. Alongside his varied professional pursuits, he also is actively engaging in theater performances and is involved with Smart Ride, a bicycling group dedicated to raising funds for HIV awareness, treatment, and education. Kevin currently resides in Fort Lauderdale with his husband, Leon. Their family includes 5 sons and 7 granddaughters. Thank you so much for being a part of the Unstuck movement.
Well, I thank you for that welcome. Thank you for that intro. I look forward to our further dialogue today, and I'm excited what your podcast are bringing in other people. And,
maybe I should change the name.
Robcast.
Maybe it should be the Rob.
Yeah, I gave you something new here, Robcast.
I love it. So anyway. Kevin, it's awesome to have you here. And I love to open these episodes with a question, because I feel that if we ask the right questions in our lives, we're going to get better answers in our lives. And that's going to lead to breakthrough in our life. The question I want to ask you today to talk about our story, your story here, is how did you decide to live your life authentically? And how does that fit into your Unstuck story?
Okay, great question. Right now I'm sitting in a coffee shop, so good thing I got these on, because lots of people are coming in and out. But anyway, how did I get unstuck? And I like the way that word authentic comes into play here. I came out when I was 55, which is in some people's eyes old. Why did you wait so long, or what happened, and when I think of the word authentic, I didn't really think I was being inauthentic a lot of times in my life. I kept proceeding through life. I did the school years, I did the college years, I did dating, and I married twice, and had 2 kids, 2 sons, and yet I knew that as the older I got, the more I knew inside here, in a lower level of my chest and my stomach, I guess it'd be, hey, that I was gay. In 1960s and 70s, 50s, we didn't use that word. Who knew what gay was? There wasn't until probably Stonewall or that people started using the word gay more. But the more I got into life and pursuing my career in education and doing leadership activities, I thought there is always this spot in me that said, you're gay. What are you going to do about it? Hey, Kevin, you got married once. What'd you do? You got married again. Not only did you get married again, but you had 2 kids. And I have to go back to part of what was prevalent in those years for me was the concept that, hey, I wanted to be a parent. I wanted to be a father. I wanted to have a relationship with somebody where that could happen. And that did happen. And so, nowadays there's so many ways you can have a child, even when you are gay. I shouldn't say even when you are gay. That's a silly thing to say, I guess. But anyway, so it wasn't until when I got unstuck, it happened in about close to 20 years ago. I was still working as a principal at an elementary school in Cary, Illinois, outside of Chicago, and still married, wondering what to do. I resumed visits with counseling, had got myself into some situations where this was sort of being gay was sort of hanging, not sort of, it was hanging stronger in my psyche. You know, what am I going to do about this? And I guess that's when I maybe in some ways I started feeling maybe inauthentic because I was successful in my career. I was able to pursue different things in my field and advance and take on lots of different roles that were very satisfying. But there was still this thing in me about what'll people think if you do this? What's your wife going to think? I mean, there's that thing. So as we went through counseling and in the midst of all this, I had a son who was at the time about 16 or 17. And I noticed things happening with him that I thought, I think he might, I think he might, I think he might be gay. And so I was able to ask him. Not that we had a typical father-son sort of yin-yang relationship, adolescent. I mean, those things that happen when kids are teens. But I was able to engage him in that, and he said, in his own way, he said, "Oh, I don't know what to do about it," or "Yeah, maybe, I don't know." And then I thought, wow, here I'm trying to father a kid who's coming through this, and I haven't come to grips with it myself. That was quite of a mallet on the head moment that said, okay, how can I be authentic with him if I can't be authentic with myself? So, you know, what I've said to people since that time when I tell my story, in some ways, my son and I came out at the same time. You know, he is a 16, 17, 18, 19-year-old, was working on his own route, his own journey. And I started working on mine. So I got unstuck by really having to be honest with my wife, and which led us to some counseling and then making a further decision that us pursuing the relationship, you know, was probably it wasn't in each other's best interest. At least that's my view. And it wasn't, did that make it any easier to make the break? No, not at all. I mean, and those listeners that are listening, divorce in any circumstances is a hard choice in life. At least it was for me, but most everything I read from other people, that's a major life change. It ranks up there in the top 7 or 8. And so just to pursue that was one thing. I was still, when I decided to do this, still had 2 years left in my contract with being a elementary school principal. And I became authentic, I guess, since we're using that word. I talked to my mother, who was alive at the time, and I told her my story. And she says, "What are you going to do about your job?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to stick with it. There's no reason for me to not. I've already made my commitment to my retirement route from that job." And I said, I'm not a soapbox person. I don't need to stand up and say, "Hey, I'm gay, I'm a gay principal." I didn't need to do that. And then, you know, her counseling at the time was about, then what do you do with my family? How do you tell them? And I have 2 brothers and many nieces and nephews and cousins and all that. She says, "What do you do?" And she said, in any situation, divorce is, let's let the family, let's let your friends learn or get used to the idea that you're getting divorced. That's a big enough chunk of information at this point. And, you know, sit tight in your job, which I was secure in. I confided in one colleague in my workplace, and she helped me navigate different things in the workplace. And then went along with the proceedings of getting divorced and going through all that, and then unpacking things as the divorce became final. This was about 18 months after I pretty much declared to myself that I was gay and started mentioning it to people. That's when I just became more free about it and said, "Hey, this is who I am. It's not the me. It's just a part of me." And so shortly after I left my position and retired and came here to Florida, I was able to talk more freely about it. So, and then in the midst of all this, I met my husband, Leon. It wasn't intended it was in the midst of the divorce proceedings, and I wasn't out seeking anything. I didn't know what I was trying to grapple with the idea of how do you get, how do I, even though I'd gotten divorced once before, how do you do it? There's no prescription for it. And so going through that life change, and then Leon entered my life through a friend, and not with the idea of partnering us up, but the idea that he too had gone through a similar situation where he was in a marriage and realized that wasn't his authentic self, and so he had come out too. So a mutual friend got us together to say, why don't you two talk so that you can process. In fact, our mutual friend had thought, I think you get a hold of this guy, Kevin. I think he's suicidal. I don't, maybe I was, I don't think I was. But anyway, when I met Leon, that thing just opened up another level of acceptance, and to be okay with then telling my brothers and being more upfront with nieces and nephews, and just letting things happen, and not saying, I think when my wife first asked me a question, it's in another book that I'm in. I'll tell you about that a little later. But she says, how'd she put it? She said, you think you're gay? And I said, well, I know I have an attraction for men. I mean, at that point, I couldn't really say it or admit it as a 50 whatever year old I was, 52, 53-year-old. And in her own way, she helped guide me through the process and helped make some of those tough decisions about what do we do now. It's never an easy decision. I mean, it became easier for me to be gay. It became easier for me to accept that I was getting divorced, and then to tell the story to my kids, who then were in their early 20s. So I think coming out and getting unstuck is a lot of storytelling. It's a lot of, and not in the way that you're defending yourself. It's a way that this is who I am. And I got to the point where this is who I am. This is what I'm going to be. This is what I've always been, but now you know the whole me. And then I put it in their hands, whoever the recipient is. It's up to you. Now I don't put that to them, but then I just let them decide. And I think that's, so for the last, that was 2005. So almost 18 years now, I'm living this part of my life. So now I'm about a quarter of my life or maybe a fifth, 20% of my life has been in this situation. And now, it's expanded my circle of friends. It's made me more, even, I've always been a confident person, a cup, 3/4 full type person, but, embracing this part of me has made it even easier to be who I am. And I think it's been a great relief. And when I'm talking to kids, in my education position, I worked to help kids and staff with LGBTQ advocacy. And so then, and I go make presentations to kids, and they would say, well, why didn't you come out? If you knew about this when you were 19 or 20, why didn't you come out then? Then it becomes a history lesson because I say, guys, kids, that was 1969, 68. Let me tell you about 68 and 69. And I said, I've said to kids, you sort of stand on the shoulders of people my age that have helped us to advance to this part where you can ask a question like that. I wasn't even in a position at that time of my life to even know what the question was or ask. I just had this feeling inside that I knew it was there, but it took me many other years to figure out how actually to make it part of my life. So that's a little bit about my unstuckness and how I'm much better off being unstuck. But I think you and I talked before we started. I think for some people, it's not easy to identify that we're stuck. And it took me years. Even I worked very well to be happy, to be a good family person, I didn't have to work hard at that. It became easy. It was natural for me to be a dad and stuff, but still I was sort of stuck. But I never used that word. I just said, well, this is who I am, and this is what I am right now. And I have to get to soccer practice, or I have to take care of the faculty meeting, or I have to teach this class, or so when this thought would enter my mind, Kev, you are gay. I said, yeah, but I got to get up and go to work and be a principal for 600 kids. So I didn't think of it in terms of stuck. I just thought I gotta keep moving, going. I gotta keep moving forward. And there were most times I didn't feel like, until my son came to me and I came to my son with this, it was then that I realized if I don't come to grips with this, then I do have to identify that I'm running away. I'm just not coping. I'm running away. And I think that the whole concept, are you stuck? Well, then for me, it was, if you don't start to move away from this and identify this and do something about it, then you're running away. Then I'm running away from the situation. And so that's really what led me to say, with help from a counselor, with help from other people, with help from friends who traveled the journey with me, it just got easier to say, this is who I am. And so
thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting because everybody is stuck at different points in their life, and like you said, you might not realize that you are stuck. So the first part is the awareness to realize, oh, I actually am stuck here. And then you can start to be like, all right, now what am I going to do about it? Right? Because it is to be trapped in, and I apply this to like everything in your life, whether you're in the wrong relationship, or you're working for the wrong business. Or for me, one of the big things for me was I felt like there was a version of me inside of me that I couldn't get out. Like I couldn't authentically be who I was because of shame or guilt. Or low self-confidence, low self-esteem. I was not able to be the person that I knew I was supposed to be. And so anybody if you're watching or listening to this and you're thinking how would I know if I'm stuck or not? Well, is there something that you think about a lot on a daily basis that you can't bring out into the world? You can't seem to find a way to bring that part of you out into the world. That's a good identifier that you're stuck in some way, shape, or form. And I too have been divorced, right? And divorce is incredibly difficult. It's really, as far as the difficult things you can go through in life, it's definitely up there. I don't know. I haven't gone through too many horrible things, but it's been really, really hard. And I'm a child of divorce also, so I think that made it extra hard. So I just want to just know I see you in that, man. Going through divorce, especially in the situation you were in, where also coming out while you're going through divorce is probably piling those two on top of each other. It was probably the pressure was, I couldn't imagine the pressure probably going through and experiencing. Can you talk to that a little bit? Because you're past it now, you're through it. How long have you been divorced for?
The divorce went through in 2006. So what are we at? 17 years.
Okay. So what was that period of your life like? How did you get, because that part of coming out and telling your wife and having her to have to take on that information and have to tell your kids, and then I guess your workplace and your friends and things like that. I assume that nobody knew. Did nobody know that you were gay until then in your life?
No, I never had been that. Oh, to say that nobody knew would be a misnomer, probably.
Okay.
They might have suspected. I was never a person. I didn't, good question, Rob. Did I have any kind of friend or anything? Yeah. In the last, there were some friends that came into my life, old time friends that had come into my life as I was trying to process all this, that I was able to say, hey, I'm gay.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world, globally, all across the country, high performers, titans of industry. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, this is where you want to be. Join the Connected Leaders Academy today. We are scaling massively. We want to welcome you in. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JAESCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
So that period of your life, because I think that's a huge story, like just of how to get out of, wow. It's like revealing to everybody that you know a version of you that maybe they suspected, like you said, maybe they didn't suspect, but for you to admit it to yourself and to them, that process had to have been very daunting.
Yeah, and I have to say that I was able to, concurrent with going to counseling with my wife, and actually, boy, I have to rephrase my question, my answer a little bit, because this is my second divorce. My first divorce occurred in still in the 1980, 81.
Okay.
81. And that was I was able to talk to that wife. That, I don't want to minimize that wife. I was able to talk to her. She and I are still very good friends. I treasure that friendship. But I was able to talk to her and her brother and sister-in-law at the time in, I want to say 1980, about these inklings, these things I had in my head. And I guess fast forward, when I decided to really be authentic about it, I could tell myself, Kevin, you've talked about this before. The people you're encountering now in your life in your 50s, this isn't the first time that you've been able to come be upfront with this. Granted, when I told that story in 1980 to my then wife and her brother and sister-in-law, I ran away. I told them our marriage came to an end. I kept pursuing my career and everything, and I just buried it again. Buried it so much that I thought the way my next step would be to find a new relationship, not with a woman. And so that was my network, and it was a very fun and enriching and nice network, and it led me to marriage a second time. So back to your question, I think. I'm trying to remember. I think I've got the question still in my head. Well, just thinking about when this journey. So yeah, I knew myself that I was gay, or I didn't use that word, but I knew then, probably in my teens. And actually, I talk about that in another book that I'm in, an anthology called Journey Out. And it's a story it was published in 2013, I believe. Anyway, it's the story about men and women too, who have been in marriages and decide, hey, this is not who I am. I got to journey out. So, and that was just one step. When I go back to 1980, that was one step, part of my journey. But what did I do? To use the word closet, I went back into that closet, and pursued the career, pursued family life, pursued a lot of things that were very meaningful to me. But there still was that pit in my stomach. I guess when I say that, I don't have that pit in my stomach anymore. And yet that pit was there for many years of my life, because I would go through a situation in life or an encounter with a friend or a family, and then it would hit me that, Kevin, you're gay. What are they going to think about you now? What are you going to do with this? I don't have that pit in my stomach anymore. And that's wonderful, not to have that pit, if you know what I mean. I think we get pits. I got pits in my stomach, whether I was going through divorce or when I might have been interviewing for a job or thinking, oh, I'm going to make a job change or a location change. Those pits were temporary. The pit I had about being gay, it was in me, from the time I was 13 or 14 up until I was 55. And it would dissipate or weaken or be small and then get big and then be small and then get big. Now it's not even on my radar anymore, that pit in my stomach. But for me, it took increments and people that came into my life to help me decide what to do about this, and counseling sessions. I couldn't have got to this place without the help of a lot of other people.
That's the truth, man. It takes a community. That's why we are, one body. People are together, right? We have to be together. We need people around us. We need, like you said, counseling, therapy, coaches, mentors, friends. Like, to be a lone wolf in this life is incredibly difficult. And I think a lot of guys especially want to like embrace this lone wolf kind of concept. And it's a lonely, difficult, horrible road to live. And yes, getting the right people in your life to help you figure out yourself, because it's really hard for you to see yourself the way you see other. You can see somebody else and you're like, oh yeah, this thing's wrong, they should fix this. And then you can also see the things they're good at, right? So you can see things in people that they're skilled at, that they're really good at, they're talented in, and it's really hard for us to see those things in ourselves, right? It's very hard for us to see that, so we need other people to highlight those things for us. And as we're coming to a close on this episode, I want to talk about the book, the title, 2 Floors Above Grief.
Yeah.
I'm interested in that title and what that means.
Sure.
I love that title. Go into that a little bit and talk about that.
Thanks for asking. Yeah. And in the book, I sometimes think of it as a coming of age story. But it's also the main it reaches to a lot of demographics. But the title, 2 Floors Above Grief, comes from my upbringing. My dad and my uncle were funeral directors in Elgin, Illinois, and my uncle started in 1930. He moved. He wanted to have a business with his name on it. He lived in northern Indiana in Hammond in 1930, in the midst of the Depression. There was no place that he could open a funeral home then, and he heard through a chain of networks, hey, there's a need for an undertaker or a funeral director in Elgin, Illinois. Well, he knew nothing about Elgin, Illinois, even though it was about a 2.5, 3-hour drive in those days before interstates. And he got married in 1930 and said to his wife, we're moving to this town. And that's part of the story in 2 Floors Above Grief. 2 Floors of Grief represents the house we lived in. It was an old Victorian house built in the 1880s. And my uncle had been in Elgin for a year, and the business was doing well. He needed a place to move the business to, and he found this Victorian house that was in need of repair, had gotten into some tough times through the financial situations of the 20s. And he came in and he converted the house. The first floor was the funeral home. Picture a 3-story Victorian house. It's on the cover of the book. And he converted that, and then my dad joined him in the business as my uncle moved to this new location. And my dad and mom had just gotten married, and they joined the business. So the two of them converted this house into a funeral home on the first floor, and then they took the second floor, which was really 5 or 6 bedrooms in this original one-family house, and they made that into their apartment, converting rooms into bathrooms and kitchens and a living room and bedrooms for their kids. And then my dad and mom moved. They were on the 3rd floor, which had been in the original structure of the house, had been a ballroom with beautiful hardwood floors, 2 stages for bands and orchestras to play. So the house was originally owned by a number of people, but through it, one of the people was part of the dairy industry, and the dairy industry, if you Borden Dairy, and as the dairy industry was growing, this is how this person was able to make their money and build a house. And entertain people, and he would have them come into the welcoming areas of the first floor and take them upstairs to the ballroom. So 2 floors above grief is the funeral homes on the first floor, and then our apartments are on the second and third floor. And so the stories in the book focus less on what's happening with the clients in the funeral home, and more with how our 2 families, my 3 cousins, my 2 brothers and myself, and my mom and dad and my aunt and uncle, how we lived together in this house and created our own family life. And it was a lot of undertakers, funeral directors, live in close proximity to their business. It's maybe true less nowadays with the way technology has changed and phone systems, but in those days it was pretty essential for the business owner to be right in the business or next door. What separates our story and what makes it even more unique is we're just not 1 family, we're 2 families. And the other unique part is, in order to get to my apartment, my bedroom, my kitchen, for my family, I had to walk through the apartment of my aunt and uncle and my 3 cousins. So we were really 2 families who became 1. And that's another theme of the book. How did all that happen? And how did we get along? How did we do that? And the way I unpack the story is, one way I unpack it is there was a period of time from like 1969 to 74 that my parents and I wrote letters back and forth. I have 700 pages of letters from between my parents and I and my aunt and uncle. And I use those as a foundation to tell the stories, using their authentic words in their letters about what it was like to be our conjoined families, and the stories that go back and forth, and how we all got along, and how my cousins and I, even though they were a little older, we were really raised as brothers and sisters. And so a lot of memoirs will talk about, they'll do it more sequenced. I was born in 1950, that kind of thing. I was developing the book and putting these stories together based on the letters that my family had written. I said, I want to take a more thematic approach. So what I do in the book is I just talk about, some part of everybody in the house was trying to, not everybody, not the kids, the adults were trying to figure out ways how to quit smoking in the 1960s and 70s. So the name of that chapter is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes. And then I tell the story about what they went through and how they did that, and how fortunate I felt not to get into that addiction. Another story is about my mom and dad had, between 1941 and 1949, they had 5 miscarriages. And there was a time in my life when I was about 10 years old when I engaged my dad in a conversation based on an old TV show called Dr. Kildare. And I had watched it as a 10-year-old, and the story was about miscarriages. Of course, I didn't know the word. I didn't know. And I just said to my dad, hey, this story was on Kildare. What's this about? So I have a dialogue in the book. I mean, not direct, because I don't remember the word for word, but I remember the feeling of sitting with my dad for those couple hours and having him unpack the whole, not only the explanation of the birds and the bees, because he had to get into that a little bit about what I was aware of at that age, but just the impact it had on him and my mom, and how a family deals with those losses, and then how you work to make they were stuck, but what did they do to get unstuck? And then that resulted in the birth of me and my brother a year later. So there's stories like that, and there's stories about just things that we did as families, or whether it's, and normalizing too. We were a family like anybody else, even though we were funeral home kids. Yeah, we had our sports teams. We had a basketball hoop in the backyard. We had our parties. When we got into our teenage years, we tried to sneak the liquor out of the cabinets. We did. I have stories about learning to drive. I have stories about going off to college. I have stories in there about the tension between my parents and I when I was protesting the Vietnam War, and the passion in those letters that I saved between the dialogue between my parents and I. And another underlying theme in the book is just the impact of the written word. the written letter. Nowadays people don't know that. We're so set on typing an email, typing a text, communicating in that way, which is certainly convenient. But how many emails do we keep? How many records of our email text do we keep to figure out what the history is of that dialogue?
Yeah.
So I think that adds another element to the book. And when I was writing it, I wanted to make that as a lesson to younger people. Hey, look, you can get on a phone or you can make an international phone call in 2 minutes, less. We didn't have that then. How did we communicate? We used letters and we used correspondence and we wrote back and forth and we waited for the mail and we ran to the post office if we could maybe get it out in the mail sooner. Or we were disappointed when the mail came and it was just bills and no letters from anybody else. So, I mean, that's an experience that, I mean, my own son, who's now 39, I have to sometimes call him and say, hey, have you checked your mailbox? Oh, Dad, I haven't been to the mailbox in a couple of weeks. So it's not anything that's on his radar. And I just laugh. But I think he's probably not unlike a lot of people that are that age. So that's a little bit about Two Floors Above Grief. I could go on, but I know we're limited here.
It sounds fascinating, man. It sounds like what an interesting story, too. What an interesting situation to be in. That is a really unique place to have grown up, I could imagine. So thank you for sharing that. And Kevin, I just want to thank you for coming on the Unstuck movement, sharing your story. And so if people want to get your book, what's the best way to get the book? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Okay, good ways to do that. Rob, I have a website, KevinO'ConnorAuthor.com. I think that's probably in your show notes there, I think. Also, people can go to Amazon. Yeah, I could give you the whole code, but that wouldn't help. Just go to Amazon and type in 2 Floors Above Grief, and it'll take you right there. And the other thing, people can, my email is KOCO7351@gmail. People can contact me that way. Those are some ways that they can get more information about the book or find ways to find me. I have a newsletter that comes out every week, and I'll be working on that today. If they go to my website, if they just fill out the contact page at the end of the website, that gets them signed up for my newsletter. That keeps them up to date with ways I'm connecting the book to other things that are happening in my life, things that are happening to other people's lives, the way the book is making an impact on other people. The way I hope the book, I do online and personal book clubs, and I was meeting with a book club online yesterday, and some of them were talking about how they didn't use the word unstuck, but they were talking about how the book made them think about something they hadn't thought about in a while. Or making a connection to a musical reference I put in, or a singer's reference, or a sports reference, or things like that. And they thought, hey, that made me go back and think about how it was for me at that time of my life. So I think in some ways, if I'm keeping with your theme, I like to think that the book and people that read it, and the audio version comes out in 2 weeks. I think it's a way that they're thinking about, maybe I'm stuck. Maybe or if they go back to that memory, they'll think, oh, maybe there's a resolution. And some of the people yesterday in the book club, my last line in the book is, there is no end to this book. Continue. Let your stories flourish and be shared. And so some of the comments at the book club yesterday were, I want to figure out a way to tell my story to my kids. I got to figure out a way. I'm not sure I want to write a book, but what am I going to do? Or what am I going to do with all the letters I have in my family? How am I going to organize those? What kind of legacy am I going to leave? Not only my kids, but anybody that picks up the book and makes it their own and wants to learn from it. So
cool.
I guess that was a long answer to your question. So
we have many resources of how to get a hold of you.
Yes,
now.
yes,
you,
yes,
Kevin.
you do. Okay.
But yeah, man, and you're very, very, very true about the written word. That's very real. Yeah, there's a lot of power in that, and I could imagine it's very powerful to have those letters from your family from that time growing up. What a time capsule to go back and relive parts of your childhood. That's probably a really special thing to hold on to.
Oh, it is. Yeah, it is. It is very much so.
And I want to just, for the audience, I take the question I asked at the beginning. I ask you this question at the end. What can you do to make that decision to live your life more authentically? And what would that look like if you did that for you to get unstuck from where you're at right now in your life? I challenge you with that question today as we sign off. Kevin,
thank you.
Thank you, sir, so much for being a part of the Unstuck movement.
Thank you.